Welcome back. This latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, the president of Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training Japan. And this is our fourth year of the podcast. And my special guest today is Petra, who is the CEO and CSO of, I'm going to say Ikea, because in Australia, that's how we call it. But how should we say the name of the company in Swedish?
Well, most of us actually say Ikea because we're an international brand. But if you want to be Swedish, you say Ikea. Ikea.
Okay, everyone take note of that. Get that pronunciation correct from now on. So, Petra, you've got a big job here. So how is it that you're in Japan running this big operation here?
How is it that I'm in Japan? Sometimes you are just super fortunate.
Oh,
I have to say. And if I take things back to how I ended up here, was that I'm Swedish. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Sweden. I lived my first 17 years in Sweden until I moved to your home country, Australia.
And here's something's wrong here. You actually left Australia and went back to Europe. That can't be right. Anyway.
And then after Australia and finishing school in Sweden as a young adult, I studied, I lived and I worked around the world. And then when it was time to take my career a little bit more seriously, I decided to marry my Swedish culture and values with a company with a strong purpose, as well as a global brand that would take me around the world, since Australia had given me the first interest to live and work internationally.
So Swedish cultural values, what does that mean? Is that something that is sort of built into the society, that generally speaking, everyone has a strong sense of Swedish cultural values, or is that something for yourself?
I think I'm very Swedish, and I think in Sweden we really, like in any society, we share the set of values. It took me quite a long time to realize, because someone said to me, "Oh, you're such a good representative of the values." And I go, what? I think it goes back to the very basics of human rights, actually. In Sweden, we believe that everybody's equal. Being a girl growing up in Sweden, I never felt that I was less worth. We're inclusive, gender, LGBT+, ethnicity, whatever it may be. We are one society, and we believe that everybody counts, everybody's inclusive, and everybody's included, and everybody is worth the same. I think that's the foundation of everything. Then, of course, if you talk about the culture dimension, it's a lot of the way we do things. Mm-hmm. That we talk about in Ikea as well, that our values is who we are, and then the culture is how we do things.
Okay. Let me just stop there for a moment. I'm going to make a little bit of a makeup adjustment on your eye, because you've got a little bit of maybe moisture here that's reflecting a little bit in the light. So just clear
I also have my...
No, that looks fine now. I've got it. You got it.
Sweating like a...
May not notice it. May not notice it at this distance, but just in case.
I can also
just in case. Yeah, that looks a little bit better.
This is not going to show on camera, right?
No, we'll cut all this out. Don't worry.
I was also lost on my way here, I have to admit.
Yeah, well, it's a very humid day today.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's an incredibly humid day today, actually. I was in the cab coming in. I was like sweating in the cab. I was like, what's going on here?
And I took the train.
Oh, you took the train. Well done you. Well done you. Well done you.
I get a little bit car sick, so I think the train is better.
Oh, really?
But not when you get lost.
You didn't get lost, did you?
No. I just took a detour.
Okay, detour. That's how we see it. All right, we'll keep it going. All right, so the company had a good value match with your own values and Swedish values, so that all was a good fit. So you join the company, and then what happens?
Then what happens, Ikea is a fantastic brand with many companies. And I had always heard that if you do a good job, you can do pretty much whatever you want to, which is absolutely true. We believe in motivation, we believe in capability, and you can learn anything. So I started in the Kungens Kurva store in Stockholm, which was at the time the world's biggest store. Which is a bit of a challenge, I'm not sure I would recommend everybody to start with the biggest. And then I had the opportunity to work there, learning everything, but learning it from a different dimension, because the Ikea stores were always built to be square, except Kungens Kurva, which was inspired by the Guggenheim Museum. So it was round, and it had 6 levels instead of 2. So I learned how to operate the store totally different from how they were supposed to be run, which I think was an amazing learning. So after that, I had the opportunity to work on country level. I have been deputy sales manager, I've been sales manager, I have been deputy retail manager. I have had the opportunity to work globally with most of the retail markets, creating strategies as well as supporting the tactics and operations. I had the opportunity to live in Poland, which is amazing because I was working for retail whilst actually 50% at the time of all furniture was produced in Poland. And I learned a lot about the production and the supplier side of things. So after that, I ended up going back to Sweden. That was absolutely not my plan, but of course a Swedish company. We have the heart of Ikea sitting in Älmhult, where Ingvar Kamprad, our founder, is from. And the heart is then the range strategies and the range development. So I worked there for 8 years, creating the strategies and providing the range for the entire Ikea world, all markets. And then I got the opportunity to move to Japan.
Well, okay, wait a minute. That sounds a bit too smooth to me. So I'm sure that, there are many places in the world to work in the group. I'm sure that many people probably thought Japan's probably an interesting place to come. How is it that you chose Japan, or they chose you for Japan, or how is it that you're the one that comes here and not someone else?
I think it's always a love affair. It has to be two parties that want to do something. I always wanted to live in Asia. Right. I've had the opportunity to work with several Asian markets, and then Japan was quite new. And of course, as retail managers, we are chosen for an assignment. It's just because you want to. It's also what the organization need. And I bring more than 20 years of experience from the entire Ikea value chain. And I think that's very important when we sit so far away from Sweden, that you have the connections and you know how it works.
And in terms of, from your point of view, had you been to Japan and then were coming back, or had never been to Japan? So this is, you get off the plane and I'm in Japan. How was that?
Yeah, that was a little bit crazy because I hadn't been to Japan for, I think, 25 years since I was fairly young and before I worked in Ikea. And it was my partner, actually, that was really seeing Japan as one of the favorite destinations. And then it was the pandemic. And during the pandemic, also in Europe, people moved not just back to Europe, but back to their home countries. While as a family, we thought the opposite. Oh my goodness, a pandemic, you can die tomorrow. We better live today.
That's a very cheerful outlook on how to go overseas and start your career in Japan. But anyway, so, you had experience living in Australia, you lived in Poland, you'd worked in the headquarters, you'd had some international experience, right, before you got here. So when you got here, it's an existing operation. It's been here for how long in Japan now?
17 years.
17 years, right? So it's not new. So what were some of the things or the contrasts you found as a leader leading in Japan compared to leading in Europe?
First of all, I had read quite a few books, also because of the pandemic.
Sorry, just hold. Hey, dozo.
Did I just say 17 years? It's 18 years.
You did. You said dozo. Hey,
it's 70.
20
years is 3 years down the line. Oh, so it was 2. I got 2006. I can't count. Yeah.
Is it 17?
Yeah, it is 17.
We'll go with that.
2006.
We'll go with that.
We always talk about our 20th anniversary.
So I'll ask you that question again. So here we go. So you had quite a bit of international experience before you got to Japan, and leading in Sweden, of course, and big roles there. So what were some of the things you found when you came here that were different? Because the operation is not new here. It's been here for how many years?
17.
17, right? So you're coming into an established operation. You're new, but no one else is new. But what was different for you as a leader leading in Japan?
A lot of things are different and many things are the same. We are human beings. I think we have more similarities and commonalities than what we have differences. But of course, it is a different culture, which is why I thought I had been a good student reading the books. Then it is a different being here. I mean, your school is different. If I take that as an example, because I strongly believe that we are very much a product of our school system and our societies. I mean, in Sweden, you're asked to question, and there's no problem questioning the teacher even. While if you take the school system here, it's more about studying, really memorizing, maybe not as much, if I have understood it correctly, to search for your own answers, but really say what it's in the book and what the teacher says.
No, you have to come up with the correct answer here.
What?
You have to come up with the correct answer.
The correct answer. Yeah, exactly. My mother always trained me to say, just answer anything because maybe you're lucky and it's right, even if you don't know. And I think that is a bit of a symbol of what you experience. Sweden and Ikea is a culture where we say making mistakes is good because it's better to do something than to do nothing. While here, mistakes are considered to be quite a serious matter. So it is a little bit, I wouldn't say culture clashes, but different cultures that need to meet, and you need to find the sweet spots in that.
Just let me stop there. Tomoto-san, someone's making some noise. Can you find out what it is and get them to stop doing that? 何か聞こえます。何か音が聞こえます。誰か何をやってると。向こう？ゴミ袋をゴミを捨ててます。ああ、そう。Okay. じゃあ、okay.
Should have invited you to our office again, maybe.
What is this? What is going on today? Anyway, we keep going. So, in terms of, well, yes, the schooling system, defects, problems, mistakes are treated totally different here, I think, to most other countries in the world. But what other things did you notice from a leadership point of view were sort of challenging or different, maybe things you didn't expect?
I think I knew a lot of things. Then it is to remember and act accordingly. I can take an example. I have a friend that is half Italian, half Japanese. In Japan, if you interrupt someone, it's rude, right? In Italy, if you don't interrupt someone, it means you're not interested, and that is rude. So I think that being a leader, you just have to remember what you have learned. You have to see what's happening in the room and really make sure that you give space to people. And I can get very passionate and enthusiastic and totally take over a conversation. And I really need to remember that I think I'm supposed to speak last, right? If you really follow the proper, at least how the culture was before. It's also an evolving culture, right? We're becoming more international, at least in international companies.
Well, I guess you're a national firm, so the Japanese who've chosen to work for a national firm probably have a little bit of a different outlook.
Absolutely. But I think I interrupted.
That's no problem because I'm Aussie. That's easy. So I guess it comes into, you probably, I'm guessing, you'd encourage people to speak up in the culture of the organisation. And so, letting them speak would be a good thing. And getting Japanese to speak up, if the trust isn't there, it's very, very difficult. But once you've got the trust there, they will speak up if they're in an international environment. So I guess you could get that. What other things were different for you?
Oh, no, I've been here almost 2 years. What else was different? I think things are different whatever country you go to, And if you don't acknowledge that we have different cultures and are brought up in different ways, you also have a hard time building on the commonalities. Is there anything specific you're after that I have forgotten?
I'm looking for things, when you come into Japan and you have perceptions or assumptions and you start leading and then things happen, you go, oh, that's different, or oh, that's a bit of a challenge, or I'm going to need to adjust myself here because this is not going to work the way I expected. And one very common one is that you expect people to speak up in meetings and they say nothing, and you're thinking you're going to get some feedback and you get nothing, right? And people start to work out, okay, I need a different approach here. And I think when we had a meeting previously, I mentioned to you that we found that if you want to get opinions out of Japanese, don't ask them their opinion. Ask them to write down what they think, and then ask them what they wrote down, and they will tell you, as opposed to, what's your opinion? oh, I'm not so sure I want to give you that because it's, am I the eldest in the room? Someone joined the company before me? Am I a lower status and a higher status person in the room? Am I female? There's a whole lot of constraining things there that stop them from doing that. So once you learn that, then you adjust the way you approach it. So that's the sort of thing I was thinking about.
And I think that's a brilliant example. Workshopping, we love workshopping in IKEA. And I had heard that it doesn't work the same way. And then, of course, experiencing that is a little bit of a shocker. So the tips and ideas is super good to get. And it works. As you say, we are IKEA also in Japan. People choose to work for IKEA. People choose to work differently. I often say that most of our people would not want to work in a very traditional Japanese company. They want something that is a little bit different, where they can truly unleash themselves and be more themselves than what they potentially could in another company.
And I'm sure when you were working in your previous posts in Europe, you found things that worked well to engage the team, to get them really motivated to do the job well. What things have you found have worked well for you in Japan to get your team engaged?
First of all, I think it is a team of very engaged and competent people from the very beginning. As you said, as I said, we have been here 17 years. We have people that joined yesterday, but we also have a lot of people that have been here since the beginning. And they are engaged to find the sweet spots and continue the love affair that exists between IKEA and Japan.
So that's a presumption that at the interview stage, or they're self-selecting or you're selecting people who are going to be a good fit for the organization. Right? So that whole theory basically is out the window these days because declining population, a lot of people have, we've got more jobs than people looking. So people who are looking around for work have a lot of choices compared to in the past. So from the employer perspective, your control or your power in the relationship is actually less now. They're interviewing us rather than we're interviewing them. So the idea that you can get the perfect match between this person's value set and IKEA's value set, and we're going to get the right happiness, marriage of convenience here between what we both are aspiring to, in a way, it's less easy today than what is, if I compare 5-10 years ago, because I've been here for 38 and I've been hiring people over that period of time, I can see a big difference in the last 5 years particularly. So how does that work in terms of you probably don't have the same spectrum of people you can hire or the same volume of people you can choose from to still get the right fit at the entry point? So I'm just wondering, entry point is one point, but then once they're inside, there's also that acculturation of helping them to really come on board with the way you do things in IKEA and the values that you talk about. So think about that in terms of it's no longer just a simple case of we select the perfect people for IKEA. I don't know that's the case anymore. Or are you finding perfect people still for IKEA?
I think we're finding perfect people.
Well done.
And I think we were never selecting people from that perspective, but it is about the partnership. I always say that the company you choose to work for is the people you're going to spend more time with, unfortunately, than your family.
That's right.
So it is important. I think it's right that people should interview us to see if it's a good match. And that is why we put the highest emphasis on the values in our recruitment process. Because if you have the values and then you have the motivation and the capability, you can learn anything. And I actually think that it's more important than ever. And also, as you say, people today can be much more selective. And I can recognize it compared to around year 2000 when we had the IT bubble in Sweden and in Europe, where young people were choosing the coolest office. It was not about the money anymore. It was about the coolest office. And now I think people choose the purpose. We also see that young people and hear that young people want to work for purpose-led companies. Where I'm super proud to work for a company that has a vision to create a better everyday life for many people through people's homes, because we believe that the better home creates a better life. And that is what people are looking for. They want to work with someone, because you don't work for someone. They want to have a partner with the company that has the purpose and that shares the values.
I don't know if you have the same expression in Swedish. I'm sure you do, but in English we say we hire for attitude and we train for skills.
Pretty much, yes.
Pretty much same idea, right?
Yeah.
So once you've got people who are engaged and you're doing this filter at the hiring process and then you bring them into the culture, and engaging them in the culture. What have you found works well to get ideas from people? Because, if you're engaged, then you care. It's the old classic. If you don't care about the company, you don't care about building a better mousetrap, who cares? But if you have that motivation, if you've got that buy-in, then you want to make things better, you want to improve things. But in many organizations, the opportunity for people to put up their ideas, to input into the system can be very limited. Oh, you're very junior, very young, you joined recently, you're a woman, you're down here, we're smart, we're up here, we're senior, we'll have all the ideas, you'll do what we tell you. But if you're thinking about getting ideas from closest to the consumer, ideas from the whole organization, so you get the full gamut of possibilities. What have you found works well to have people be creative and encourage them to come up with ideas?
That's a very good question, because it's not as easy as it sounds theoretically.
I know, I made that sound pretty smooth, didn't I?
Exactly.
Just give us those ideas and we'll just move ahead with those, yeah?
And we talk very much about our key values, which is about togetherness. And in togetherness, it is the collaboration and the co-creation. We try to be clear with saying that not everything comes from the manager, that it is the many people. We want to collaborate and co-create with our customers, and we want to collaborate and co-create with our co-workers. Then if we talk about the cultural differences, it's potentially not how you were trained in school. So this is the one that needs a lot of encouragement, because of course, naturally when people are new, they think they should go to their manager. Well, I say, you can come to me and I will come to you. If I think, I will talk to whomever I think have the right answer. And I encourage everybody else to do the same.
That must be a bit challenging for your direct reports, though. In most Japanese companies, the thought of a senior leader going around or across the reporting line to someone under the direct reports or under the managers, in many Japanese companies would be terrifying, because they'd be worrying, what are they telling this senior person about me? And you're undercutting my authority. And why are you doing that? It should go through me. So you've got this sort of built-in hierarchy in Japan, which doesn't really like that sort of management by wandering around type of American ethos that we read about in Praise of Excellence, in Search of Excellence, I should say, with Waterman and Peters. But you're doing that. So how do you set that up with your direct reports? Do you encourage your direct reports to do the same thing? How does that work in your organization?
I encourage everyone to do the same thing, to instead of seeing half the world or, working through layers, as I said, to go to the person that you think has the right answer, and encourage everybody else to do the same. I have learned the hard way, though, that I have to share that this is how I function, this is how I work, and this is how Ikea works. And I think we're also throwing some logs into the fire sometimes, where we have co-worker competitions where any co-worker can pitch an idea, not just within Japan, but we also have those globally. So we make a systematic approach out of disrupting hierarchies and allowing whomever to raise their hand and say, I have an idea.
So have any Japanese ideas been picked up for global?
Oh yeah, I'm so proud. We have something that we call best practice, where we throw in good examples. And there's quite a few coming from Japan that are now implemented in all markets across.
If it's not too secret, can you share any?
I can share one, because as a customer you will discover it. Where one of our Japanese stores came up with the idea to simplify the whole process of becoming an Ikea family member, our membership community. So also being a little bit technical here in Japan, they said that if I have a QR code on my badge that I always have on me, the customer could just scan the QR code and then immediately access becoming an Ikea family member. And it's so...
That's quick.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, of course, you need to do a little bit of administration, but it's so simple. And that's one of the many examples that were invented by co-workers here in Japan that now exists globally in Ikea.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thank you. And in terms of, we talked a little bit before about idea generation, how if you ask Japanese team members about their ideas, they're scanning the room, who's older, who started before me, who's male, who's female, who's high status, who's low status. And also that filters into the idea creation side of things too, that, I should constrain myself at my position relative to others, and they should be the ones providing the ideas. So, how do you break through that wall in Japan of the sort of self-constraint that's going on, and people are not brave enough, even very junior people put their ideas up for fear of ridicule or someone scolding them, or, hey, you're not smart enough, old enough, or senior enough to put up ideas yet. What are you doing? That type of suppression of creativity. Have you found any ways to get around that?
I think we have a lot of networks in our different units. Like you have entrepreneurship trainings, and then you have maybe a network around omnichannel. Right, we have transformed ourselves from a brick and mortar retailer to being a true omnichannel retailer, and that is where we have asked in the different units, okay, who has a passion to really fast forward these things, and that is where you get a group of enthusiasts independent of position, where we say everybody's welcome. Sustainability is another thing where we really wanted to leapfrog that a few years ago. Who has a lot of energy in bringing sustainability closer and more understandable to the customer? So I do. So we really have a systematic approach to the collaboration and the co-creation independent of titles.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. One other big area of interest to me is how you build trust in Japan, because you had a predecessor who'd been running the organization here in Japan, another woman, 2 women in a row, that's impressive. But she'd obviously been running the organization for a while, and then you're the new leader. So yes, they choose the company because they want that international flavor. They want a different experience. They go and join a Japanese company just as easily, but they choose to come and work here. And so you have come in as a new leader. You need to build trust with the team because they've been guided by the predecessor. They're loyal to the predecessor's ideas. Now you turn up. Now you haven't been here for 20 odd years, I think you told me. So it's all new again to you, and you're bringing the family, and so you're moving to a new country. So in terms of building trust with people, how did you approach that when you first got here?
Well, first of all, when people ask, so what's your agenda? I say quite honestly, it's to continue what we did before, because we are a global company. We have global goals. Then, of course, it's about being Japan specific. But I think it's super important to be transparent that it's not my ideas, it's the Ikea ideas. And we're going to continue what we did before. There's not a change of direction because there's a new leader coming in. Then I think we're all different as leaders, but it's more of how we are and how we unleash people, much rather than changing the business ideas.
Yeah, and I guess also we all have our own personalities, we have our own aspirations, our own ideas, so we're going to bring these as a strength to the organization. And how about, in your case, how did you explain to people how you operate? Because, you know, if I think about my predecessor and myself, we operate quite differently. And I made a very clear point. Well, this is how I operate. This is what I do. And this is, you know, how I will organize the organization, how I run the organization. So people are very clear about me because they don't know me either because I'm new. So did you do that? Did you sort of give them a bit of a rundown on the Petra way of doing things around here or not?
I wish I did, because when I look myself in the mirror, and I'm super honest here, that's the one where I was not clear enough. And I think that took too long for people to figure out. And I think that comes back to what you said. Yeah, you move, you bring your family, you're sort of in a personal loop. Also, I was in a loop because when I joined, it was still the pandemic. I had been working from the closet, actually, of a temporary apartment for 5 months. So you're sort of hanging upside down. You have met a lot of people over Teams and Zoom, but you have never set foot in a country. So if I could turn back time, that's the one thing I would change, where I would be much more clear with how I lead and what I expect. Because sometimes people say, can you be a bit clearer with what you expect? Do we do well or do we do not? You know.
I think particularly in Japan too, because Japanese are very comfortable when the rules are set and the lines are drawn very clearly, and we operate in this box, and they want to know what is in that box that I need to control so I don't make any mistakes and have any problems. And so once they know that, they feel comfortable to move forward. But when it's a bit sort of, oh, we'll just freestyle and we'll be spontaneous, like, whoa, no, not so keen about that, because I don't know where the box limits are. I don't know where the line is for me. And so that's, I think, for a lot of Japanese employees, that's why they love the job description. And if anything is outside that job description, they're not happy. Like, hang on, that's not my job description. And not because they can't do it, it's because they fear they might fail or they might make a mistake, and they don't want to have that come back on them. Let's talk a little bit about culture, because you've mentioned culture and values already quite a bit in terms of the company ethos. So in terms of, you've already got an existing global IKEA culture. You've got an existing 17-year culture, or probably 15 years by the time you got here, 15-year culture in Japan. What did you think about your contribution to building that culture in Japan?
My contribution to bringing the IKEA culture within
Japan.
It's
your version of the culture as well, because you're a leader. You know, I'm part of the Dale Carnegie global culture, and I'm part of the Dale Carnegie Japan culture, but I'm also someone who brings my take on the culture to my team. I interpret that culture to my team as I see it, right? So I'm the person who sets the direction, I set the tone, I'm defending the culture of the organization, and we're building it all continuously here amongst the team ourselves. So how about in your case, how did you think about how you're going to bring that culture from your perspective, your take on it, to the organization?
I think my contribution is that I try to demystify, because when you have operated for a long time, IKEA has existed for 80 years and IKEA Japan has existed for 17 years. And then you do things and you say things, but you don't necessarily dig deep onto the why. You're just using the words without elaborating on what do we actually mean. And I try to elaborate what do we actually mean with different things within IKEA. I try to elaborate on the importance of networking and not only sticking to the job description, because actually a job description in IKEA, that is very big. There's no limits to how much responsibility you can take or how many ideas you can come up with, and I try to explain why that is. And I also try to explain the love affair between IKEA and Japan, or Sweden and Japan, and the similarities that we have. Sometimes we think we're so different, but we actually have a lot of similarities. As I always say, we come from two quite poor countries that are hard to agriculture. It takes a lot of effort to grow rice, or it takes a lot of effort to grow anything in Sweden, and especially in Älmhult, where IKEA is from. So when you find the similarities of why it's so important to work together, for instance, that's when people making the connections. People love to make the connections, and sometimes you just have to support that a little bit.
And what other things have you found in terms of creating or developing the culture further, or deepening the understanding of the culture?
Deepening the understanding of the culture, as I said, keep talking about it, keep demystifying, keep finding the sweet spots on the commonalities, explaining why things are in a certain way in IKEA based on why things are in a certain way in Sweden, and why that would also be good for IKEA Japan, and why that is also good for Japan. Then I think we have the love affair I keep talking about. There's a lot of love for Sweden in Japan. There's a lot of love for IKEA in Japan. We are often asked to have different talks, especially around sustainability, or people and planet positive, as we call it. So there is an admiration. We just need to get into the depth of that. So it's not just inspiration, but it's coming together and making a difference together.
Now, if you're going to give some advice to someone who's being sent to Japan, they don't know Japan, they don't speak Japanese, They're going to be sent in to run the organization. Okay, you go to Japan, run the organization. They, hey, Petra, I've got this job. I've got to go to Japan. What do I do? What would be some advice you'd give them to be successful here?
I would advise to read some books, maybe also your books.
Well, let's just plug the book, Japan Business Mastery, folks. You've got to get this one if you want to know about doing business in Japan.
No, I do think that you need to do your homework on the culture so that you understand, of course, the similarities and the commonalities, but also the differences. You need to understand why things are different. Not that it is different, but why it's different, so you can find the commonalities going forward. Speaking of books, I think you also need to reread the books after 6 months when you've sort of been here. You need to find people that you can trust, that will sort of be the bridge. I'm quite fortunate. There's quite a few people in the organization that are in Ikea Japan that are Swedish, although they might have lived here as long as you have. They have often
you mean individuals?
Japanese individuals.
Okay,
they have
right.
Japanese spouses. They have children in Japanese schools. The ones that can sort of explain to you why things are in a certain way. You need a translator, because sometimes you sit and you wonder, what is this? And it's not always that Japanese person always have lived in Japan, just as a Swedish person always have lived in Sweden, can see clearly why is it this way. So you need.
Is there a big Swedish community here to draw on?
No, I don't think so. It used to be 10,000 people in Tokyo, which is a lot, I guess, Swedish people before the pandemic. Now it's a lot less.
Is it?
Then we don't know all the people that have been here for a long time.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of long-term Swedes here, and I've met a few of them myself. And so, again, what other advice would you give to someone who's being sent here?
Have open ears, have open eyes, because there's a lot of things that are not outspoken. If you don't speak Japanese, try a little. I don't. I'm super sorry. I think it's people are very happy if you can speak just a little bit.
I believe Swedish is one of the most difficult languages to learn. So I'm wondering, for you, learning Japanese, is that relatively difficult for you?
It's super difficult.
Super difficult.
Super difficult.
Okay.
Also, I'm very spoiled because I'm Swedish. I know a little bit of German. I know a little bit of French. I've lived in Poland, which covers pretty much from a language perspective. I grasp a lot in Europe. And then you come to a country where, it took me 1 year to learn kudasai. Embarrassing to say, but you don't just pick up the Japanese.
No, you got to study it.
Yeah, and then I think you also to be yourself. I mean, trying to adjust and be respectful to the different routines. Like I tried very hard with the business cards, but also realize that you will never be Japanese. But as long as you respect different behaviors and you try to do well, you also need to accept that you will never fully fit in,
And I think, the Japanese are quite in agreement with that. You'll never fit in because you're not Japanese, and it's in the blood. It's not a case of, I was talking to an American guy yesterday, as it turned out, and he's become Japanese citizen. But both he and I know you will never be considered Japanese because it's not in your blood. So their expectation of us to be Japanese is zero for a start. So that takes a lot of pressure off. No one's expecting you. I mean, if you're in Australia and you're coming from many countries around the world, people sort of expect you're going to be like Australians and blend in, and maybe Sweden's the same. You should become like Swedes and blend in. Here, you don't have that pressure to blend in. It's like, no, you're different. That's okay. We accept that. You're never going to be Japanese. We're okay with that. We're happy to have you here, type of thing. So I think that takes some of the pressure off. What other things would you recommend that they do?
Be yourself. Be authentic. If I take my own learning of not being clear enough when I joined here, who am I, or rather, how do I lead? Be outspoken, even if it's not the typical Japanese way. I think you need to explain yourself a little bit more because it takes the pressure off. And people don't need to worry. And that's not just in Japan, that is in any country, And that is even being Swedish within Sweden. It helps if we are transparent. This is who I am. This is how I am. And, at least that's how I am,
Although
I guess with transparency over perfection.
I guess in Western countries, Australia is a very direct culture. I mean, imagine Sweden's fairly direct too. The Swedes I've met have all been pretty direct, I have to say. The stereotype there, but they tend to speak their mind. But here, you have the public face, the tatemai, and you have the real face, the hone. And that's, this is my interpretation, but this is a culture that's been living cheek by jowl, high population density, close living in villages, now in big urban centers for a very long time. So people in Japan have worked out a way to harmonize differences is to reduce some of the touch points where there's going to be conflict. So we have a sort of, one level of superficiality, which is harmony, and we sort of hide the hone to keep the harmony. And so you've got this, I mean, sometimes foreigners say, Japanese are two-faced. Yeah, they are, because they've got one level to keep the harmony, so they don't say directly what they mean, they mask it, and then the other's what they really think, but they don't express it. So they want to keep that public, harmony or balance going. So you've got that basic difference. In Australia, we speak our mind more directly. Maybe in Sweden you do the same thing. But when you come here, maybe you don't speak your mind so directly. Did you find that yourself, that you needed to temper a little bit your direct idea explanation to people, or were you able to speak directly? Are you advising people to speak directly? What's the lead there?
We have the Swedish culture. No, I should not say Swedish culture. I will explain that. We have the Ikea culture across the Ikea world. So we encourage people to speak up. Then I knew about this with the different truths. And you know what? The reason why you perceive Swedish people to be very direct is that we have quite a poor vocabulary. We don't have so many words, so we can't beat around the bush. We say it straight away. And actually, Swedish culture is very much like Japanese culture. I always take the example of if you have a neighbor that mows the lawn early in the morning, you will not tell the neighbor if you're upset about it. You will tell the other neighbor and say, it's so upsetting that he mows the lawn at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So actually Japanese and Swedish culture is much more alike than what you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Now we don't have to live 125 million people together in Sweden. We're only 10 million and 8 when I was a kid. So there the importance of harmony, the wa, or tillsammans, the togetherness, was because you needed your neighbor to actually be able to work as a farmer,
Yeah.
You needed to have the togetherness, just as here we need to have the togetherness.
Right.
So many more similarities than differences.
Then it looks like,
yes.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk a little bit about women in leadership in Japan. So as I said before, you are the second female leader that I've met in Japan. I think your predecessor was the first one, would that be correct? And you are now number 2. So that's very interesting. In terms of being a woman leading in Japan, what things have you found are different or challenging, or things that you needed to accommodate to be successful as a leader as a woman? What things work well for women in leadership positions in Japan?
I think first of all, I'm in a very privileged situation because I work for an international company. I'm a woman, yes. But it's not seen as strange. And as you say, I'm the second one. Someone said to me a while ago, and you're the second CEO that's female. You're really serious about this. So I think that's setting
We're not joking.
No, yeah, exactly. You're not joking. So for us, it's a natural thing. I sometimes get the questions, do you have any hindrances? No, I don't. And that's why I say I realize, because we're so different. Then, of course, it is very different that we have so few female managers in Japan. Not in Ikea Japan. We have a 50-50 or even 51% female managers. Super proud of that.
Now, is that a result of a policy? Is that a result of men don't particularly want to work in this business, and so it suits women more in this retail environment? Or what is that?
We do have more women than men in Ikea, but it is starting with the values. We believe in human rights. We believe in gender equality, all the way from life at home to life at work. Then we have also a systematic approach. We realize that it's not just a nicer working environment having gender equality. You also take better business decisions. half of our customers are women, so of course half of our managers and co-workers.
Half of your customers women? I thought
Yeah,
I thought it'd be higher
more,
than that.
Yeah, but population is half. They buy
True.
for themselves as
True.
well as for the men, right? So
True.
maybe that didn't come out right.
Well,
Sorry
when
for
I
that.
go shopping at Ikea, my wife's making the decisions. I can assure you of that. It isn't me.
But
I'm there to lug the thing home. I'm not there to make any
Exactly.
decisions.
But she's buying for you, okay?
Yeah,
So
that's
from
true.
that perspective,
That's true.
the users, maybe I should say, are
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah.
No, so of course it's from a business perspective, but we are. It is a better business to have diverse teams, not just from a gender perspective, but all kind of different perspectives. And then you have to have a systematic approach. I mean, it would not happen even in Sweden from an only humanistic approach, even if discrimination against gender has been against the law since, I think, late 70s or 80s in Sweden. You need to make sure that you have the goal settings in place. We have a goal in Ikea globally that we should have 50-50. We have encouraged women with mentorship programs in Ikea Japan. We have goal settings for our trainings. You need to have the systematic approach. It doesn't happen by itself because automatically maybe some people will take more space than others.
Well, I mean, there's no shortage of Japanese companies here who have a vast majority of women as the workers, but a very, very poor representation in management. All the leaders are guys and all the staff are women. So as you say, sort of organically, it doesn't necessarily translate into having any sort of balance between the two. So what you're saying is have a structure, have a targets and work towards that and help people to get there, I guess. But it must be very motivating for women, though, when they join the organisation and they see, oh, a lot of women leaders here. I could be one too, as opposed to if I join a Japanese company, maybe I'll never be a leader or I'll maybe get to a very low level of leadership. So I guess that must be also very inspiring for people.
Hope so.
You hope so. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
And I think it works since we have more than 50% female managers.
So think about some advice for women who, now we know in Japan, we talked about these percentages before, that if a job vacancy is coming up or a potential job opening is there, a man who only has roughly, this is a rough statistic, but 60% of the requirements for that job will have no hesitation putting his hand up. A woman, though, which I'm told, according to statistics, they say she needs to feel she has 90% of the job to put her hand up. So there's a sort of restraining factor for women, maybe more so than men. So what's your advice to women about, hey, put your hand up, even if you don't have 90%. If you've only got 60%, go for it, because that's what the men are doing. Or what's your advice for women to move into leadership and be a success?
My advice to women would be, of course, to believe in yourself, which is easier to say, it's harder to do. I think it's very important that we as a company, we lead by example and show up. As you say, of course, it is an inspiration that there's a female CEO and that we have a management team, a country management team with even more women than men in it, to show that it's absolutely possible. I encourage people to be true to themselves, do what you want to do, think about what you want to do, not what you think others think that you should do. Believe in yourself, be true to yourself, and be the change you want to see. If you want things to change, someone needs to start or someone needs to tap on. And Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see.
In the world, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For yourself, first and foremost, of course, but also for others, because you can inspire others. And when you say to people, you could be the source of inspiration. What? Me? Puts a different perspective. And also be the change for the future generations to come. If you want things to change going forward, take the lead and be that change. And
did you have very important or what should I say, developmental mentors in the home office when you were working in Sweden? Did you have women there who were mentoring you, coaching you to step up into leadership positions? I would say yes and no. Again, I'm Swedish. Growing up, I've been playing soccer. I was never told what I could or could not do. Being Swedish, I took for granted that we have equal rights, which we do. And then in Ikea, we have had, and still do,
female networks, because there is something about having other peers to talk to. I once had a female manager, and I asked her, so why is it so that you're promoting women? And she was on a bad day. She said, you know what, I have to do it because no one else does, you know. But I think that's not it, because what has inspired me even more are the men that treated me as equals, you know. So it is leading by example from both genders. I think it's as important that men promote women as women promote other women and men, you know. We have to lead by example.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? We started doing diversity, equity, inclusion training probably about 5 years ago, I'd say, and pre-COVID. And the initial requests were, please come in and train the women. I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, what do you mean come in and train? Well, you're happy to train the women, but what about the men? Because the CSO, the section head, has usually got the largest number of people reporting to them directly, and usually they're the ones who are doing the communication, coaching, development, career development for their team. And if those CSOs are not seeing the women's potential or having a view that their job is to develop everybody, they're going to favour the men. And for a long time in our courses, we would get, it's changed now, but we would get maybe 70% men in the classes and 30% women. I always questioned that. Asked the company, why are there so few women in our classes? Because the men are not selecting them. So this whole thing around, you know, you've got to get to the section heads, I think, section heads are the key, and educate them about what their role is in terms of people development, not just men development. And if you get them to get it, then things can change and they will coach the women. But often it's a case of, well, they're going to get married. It's a waste of time. They're going to have children. They're not going to be coming back. It's a waste of time. I think we've gone beyond that now because so many women are coming back into the workforce and even if they have children, you know, they come back. So I think we're seeing a bit of a change here in Japan, but still, I feel it's not quite there yet. But do you have programs in Ikea to encourage women to come back after having kids?
I wouldn't say that it's a program. It's an outspoken, it's not a value, but you know, that's what we take for granted. That is why we give parental leave to both partners after the child is born, also independent of the gender. We encourage men to go on parental leave. We think it's important that people stay home with their children, and we encourage them, of course, to come back. We also talk a lot about equality, gender equality in life at home, because we do know that most women are expected to take a bigger responsibility, both for children as well as the housework. And then, of course, since life at home is also our business, we talk about it a lot and we acknowledge. I think it's important to acknowledge and dare to talk about that is how it is, you know.
So, okay, in terms of any other final advice for younger women who are thinking, right, possibly, and a lot of them are never getting married, they've decided not to get married, or they can't find a partner that's going to match their aspirations, and so they see work for them as a career option that's lifetime, of course, and they want to go forward. So what's some advice for that group? You've talked about for the women, right, already who've got children, etc., coming back, but that group of so-called career women in this country, and there's quite a big chunk of them, actually. I meet quite a lot of them. What would be some advice for them?
Same thing there. Be the change you want to see for yourself and for the generations to come. If they can work for Ikea, I will still encourage them to go home and have a life.
Okay.
We don't want anyone to be working the 80 hours per week. We want people to have work-life balance. I will never tell people how to live because that is their choice. Although I will advise how to work, because we believe that we are much better at work when we also have a work-life balance and replenish the private and personal energy.
Finally, what's your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is doing something you love to do, both from a business and people perspective, and to share that devotion with others, so that you together can create a team and accomplish the things that you really want to do.
Thank you. We've covered quite a bit of ground. Petra, any final comments, anything we haven't covered you'd like to add when we talk about leading in Japan?
Oh, we have talked a lot. No, I think I will.
We covered it all?
I think you can never. Leadership is a never-ending story. It's like life, you can never cover everything.
That's true.
But I would encourage everyone to, if they're not living in Japan already, to come to Japan. If you're up for an amazing journey, a little bit of a challenge on your personal leadership, and just embrace and accept differences and similarities. Japan is amazing.
I think Japan's amazing too. I've been here a long time. I'm not going anywhere. This is it for me. So on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.